All right, I'm going to give folks just a minute to join, make sure everyone's audio is on. We're very excited about this panel today. So, hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tanya Launhecht. I am the Communications Director for Outdoor Alliance, and I'll be moderating the conversation today. So I'll be talking for the next 3 minutes or so, and then hopefully you won't hear as much from me. I'm currently based in Portland, Oregon, on the land of the Multnomah, Cowlitz, Clackamas, Chinook, Molalla, and many other tribes. But I grew up in the East Bay in California, in Oakland and Berkeley, and lived in California's 13th district for 12 years. We had a really fun conversation just before this started about where we all went to high school in the area. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. An all-woman panel with some of the smartest people working on the outdoors, advocacy, climate, and equitable access in California. I hope the conversation proceeds much like a conversation, since we just have so much expertise today and so many wonderful things to talk about. So before we go ahead and introduce our panelists and our very special guest, I'd like to do just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. So first, we will be recording this session. We'll send it out to everyone who registered, and it will also be available on our website. So that will be going around tomorrow. We'll have some time for questions at the end. So if you have a question, you can use that Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen, at any time during the panel, and ask your questions. And then before we all launch into talking, I'd love to ask everyone who's attending some questions. So I'm going to launch some polls, and if everyone wouldn't mind answering these questions. So the first one is, where are you joining us from? Then what organization do you represent, if you represent one? And then what would you most like to hear about from the Congresswoman? So take a minute, fill out the poll. It should pop up on your screen. All right, we're letting people answer these questions. While folks are answering, I'd also like to share a quick thank you to Katie Hawkins, who runs our Outdoor Alliance California team and has just done an incredible job behind the scenes setting all of this up. We're very grateful to her for organizing this and helping everything run smoothly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Hopefully I can show you all the results. All right, can you all see the results? So a lot of folks from California and from the East Bay, a lot of folks from nonprofit, and would love question. It looks like we're gonna want to talk about federal funding, climate, and equitable outdoor access. So thank you all for answering those questions. All right, so I would love to have our panelists introduce themselves. We'll go Ruth, maybe you can go first, then Lauren, then Teresa, and then I will introduce the Congresswoman.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's really a pleasure to be here and to speak with you once again. Thank you so much for your time. Congresswoman Lee, I grew up in your district and followed your footsteps to Mills and to UC Berkeley. And you have absolutely been my role model for activism. And that's what the East Bay has been all about ever since I can remember. And today's manifestation of that activism, if you will, for me is Outdoor Afro, that celebrates and inspires Black leadership and connections to nature nationwide. We're now in 33 states, 56 cities. We have about 60,000 people in our participation network doing all kinds of outdoor recreation activities. And really what sits at the heart of this work is exactly what we're going to talk about today, is access, welcoming, and resources, recognizing that so many people don't know where to go and where to turn. And as we've learned over this last couple of years with the pandemic, with everyone falling in love with nature all over again, the need is greater than ever before, but importantly, our planet needs people to care. So I'm just looking forward to talking with you today and hearing about your ideas and inspiration for how we can support you.
My name is Lauren Hatfield. I work at Clif Bar Company, which is headquartered in Emeryville, California, on the traditional land of the Muwekma Ohlone people. And as a company, we are driven by our purpose, which is to redesign the business of food for health, equity, and earth. I work in marketing, and one of the great things about being a marketer at a company like Clif Bar is being able to put the reach of our brands behind important issues and form partnerships with people and organizations that are doing amazing work, like RU and Outdoor Afro and other Outdoor Alliance members as well. So I'm honored and excited to be here with you all today talking about climate and public lands and access. And thank you, Congresswoman Lee, for being here. Our Clif Bar Emeryville headquarters are in your district, and we appreciate your time for today's conversation about issues that are important to Clif Bar and to me personally.
All righty, I guess it's my turn. My name is Teresa Larejo Simpson, and I am the California Stewardship Director for American Whitewater. Our mission is to protect, restore, and enjoy our nation's whitewater rivers, and I reside in Gold River, which is the homeland of the Nisenan tribe, who carry the traditional knowledge of the American, the Bear, and the Yuba River watersheds. It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me, and I am truly humbled by the company of my fellow panelists and to have a conversation with Congresswoman Lee. Thank you.
Thank you all. So I am very, very pleased to be able to introduce our special guest, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Representative Lee is a forceful and progressive voice in Congress dedicated to social and economic justice, international peace, and civil and human rights. First elected in 1998 to represent California's 9th congressional district, Representative Lee is a social worker by profession and has been a lifelong advocate for constituents and families. She has a strong commitment to climate and its intersections with equity and justice. Congresswoman Lee is a senior member of the House Appropriations Committee and chair of the Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations. She serves as co-chair of the Steering and Policy Committee, former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, chair emeritus of the Progressive Caucus, co-chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus Health Task Force, and co-chair of the Pro-Choice Caucus. She also serves as chair of the Majority Leaders Task Force on Poverty and Opportunity. As a member of the House Democratic leadership, she is the highest ranking African-American woman in the US Congress. She has done so many wonderful things, is such an incredible role model for so many, has done wonderful work, most recently on the infrastructure package, a women in climate bill, so much. We are really, really lucky and delighted to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, listen, first of all, Tanya, thank you for that very warm introduction. And thank you, Lauren and Teresa and Ruth for your work each and every day, for being with us, and for your gracious comments. Let me just say a couple of things just about me personally. Well, first of all, this forum and this webinar is so important because it takes all of us to make a difference. And I would say protect our planet, but now I'm about to say to save our planet. I think we're at that point. This is a climate emergency on so many fronts. But California, of course, continues to lead the efforts to combat climate change, including the benefits of creating public and accessible outdoor spaces. And Rue, I was listening to you talking about equitable outdoor spaces. I just have to tell you this. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. But I was a Brownie and a Girl Scout, and a lot of people want to know where I became an environmentalist. And I am telling you, it was being a Brownie and a Girl Scout, being outdoors, hay rides, cookouts, hikes. We did everything. My mother made sure that we understood the relationship between human beings and nature. And so I grew up kind of in this space. And so every chance I get to talk about this and be with you, I really love, because I am convinced that if we get more young people of color, especially, into the outdoors, so much that will transform their lives. And I know it transformed my life because I just grew up in my religious tradition, believing I had to honor and protect our planet. And it came from learning about the outdoors and being with nature as a very young child. And so I just want to see more kids have access to what I did and to what you all have, especially low-income Black and brown kids, Indigenous children, children who just, are clamoring for understanding their environment and understanding who they are in this world. Federal, state, and local budgets and private investments, they should reflect the urgency of our time, and again, must prioritize climate action. We have to ensure that those disproportionately impacted are at the front line of climate change, including women, youth, and people of color, and that they have a seat at the table as it relates to policy decisions. And those who are working in the outdoor spaces need to be there also as we make these hard decisions. And so I introduced HR 260, the Women in Climate Change Act. And I just have to tell you, some young people from my district in Northern California came to me several years ago. I mean, these are like high school kids. And they had a bill that they had written, and we'd worked with them. But lo and behold, they finished the bill, they wrote the bill, the ideas and the provisions of the legislation. They came to me and they asked me to introduce it. And these are high school young people. And of course, I had to do that. And we introduced it with a press conference, and that's the House Resolution 29, which supports climate change education in schools. And I'll speak to that further during the panel. But I share that because it's young people who really get it, and they know that it's their world to inherit. And so I'm always inspired to be with my young people and to know that they're embracing the movement in their own way, because they're very authentic about the planet on which we live. And talking about clean energy, we see right now what's happening with not having a clean economy, and seeing how the prices of gasoline, the global gas and fuel crisis, how that's fueling inflation that many are facing, everyone is facing. And so I recognize the immense challenges that we all face, especially, again, for communities of color. This is just another layer of difficulties and challenges that we all face if you're low income, or if you're an Indigenous person, or a person of color. And so we have got to help the United States, and you all have to lead us to reach energy independence. And I think everyone is now beginning to catch up with where we have been for a long, long time. We know, again, Black and brown communities bear the brunt of our climate crisis. Racism is ingrained in every part of our society. It's in the DNA of this country. And that's why your environmental justice work is critical to our future. Again, going back to my childhood, I grew up again in El Paso in a Black and brown neighborhood. And there was a plant, Arseco plant in El Paso, for those of you who have read this history. That plant emitted pollutants throughout my lifetime, until we left California. We left it, but it was still emitting all of the toxins. And people my age and my friends, most of them, including family members, have serious lung diseases, died an early death. My sister has multiple sclerosis, my grandfather, my mother's COPD, bronchitis. I mean, and it was because we were Black and brown and we lived in that neighborhood that they cited that doggone plant right there. And so environmental racism for me, again, just like understanding nature and the environment and the benefits of being out there, I also understand the environmental racism and how it kills people. It makes people deadly sick, deadly ill. And so the health disparities in this country are enormous. And so much of it has to do with the health impacts of living in Black and brown communities, in low-income communities. You know, we passed this week, this is another bill, HR 2773, which is Recovering America's Wildlife Act of 2022. And it was an important bill to pass because it explained and laid out the health of our global communities and how we must rely on the health and the life of our fish and our wildlife. And so in Congress, we're fortunately moving some bills forward. Not enough though, and not fast enough. I chair the subcommittee, as Tanya said, on state and foreign operations of the Appropriations Committee. And let me tell you, I have 5 or 6 different accounts that address the environment. Last year, and I'm gonna try this again this year, I put over $1 billion in the Global Green Climate Fund. Guess what? It got off of the floor of the House and the Senate took it out. So we're starting all over again this year. So this is, don't think this is not political. So I hope all of you, regardless of 501, 501c3, C4, whatever your status is, I'm not talking about partisan politics in terms of the structure in which you're working. And I'm talking about voting and voting for people who reflect your values and who reflect what we must do to save our planet and to make sure that there's equity in outdoors and making sure that we are able to move forward. And my again, the funds that I have to fund, which I'm really proud to fund, and not nearly enough, but at least I have some, and I have a lot of push from you all to help me get as much money into those green funds as possible. Okay, and this will be the last thing I talk about, is President Biden's executive order committing, and I think this is important, to ensure that 40% of the overall benefits from federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities to the America the Beautiful campaign. That was originally called 30 by 30 initiatives. And so I'm going to continue to fight for equitable outdoor spaces, conservation, restoration, and so much more. But I just want to thank you guys, that I probably will have to leave maybe after 30 minutes, but just continue and just know you inspire me. And it's so good to see everybody. I'm here in Washington, D.C. fighting on these appropriations bills right now, trying to get us as much investment tax dollars into building schools and climate initiatives rather than building prisons and creating more wars. So thank you all again.
Thank you so much for that. There is so much in there. I'd love to be able to unpack some of it. Rue, I don't know if you wanted to start with America the Beautiful.
Yes, thank you so much. And I just want to say that I really admire and am thankful for your determination and your relentless collaboration, even when people are not willing to collaborate with you, bringing things back to the table again and again. And that's what kind of leader that I'm proud to vote for, and what we all need for our climate. So thank you for that. And I just want to touch in briefly about 30 by 30 or America the Beautiful, because, you know, we want to know on the ground, as not-for-profit organizations especially, you know, how can we partner with you for implementation? How can we get that good decision to really live on the ground and be of benefit to our communities? And if you have ideas about that, but I really want to figure out how we can support you and activate America the Beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good question. I'm thinking about that because I got to see how much money is associated with it. There's got to be some resources through the Department of Interior. And I think the best way we can do this is identify funding and fund some of these programs that will be aligned with the goals of this initiative. And so let's work and see where the resources are, because I know, you know, executive orders are fine, they're great. But if you don't have the money behind them to fund the outcomes and the strategies. And so I think that's the best way, is to help with getting these proposals in, knowing what the deadlines are for the funding of it, and doing the work that is required to do.
I
Thank
would
you.
love if I could to build with kind of a different angle on that same question. And, you know, working at a purpose-based company, we have the ability to activate our employees and our partnerships and the donations that we choose to make, and use our company's reach and influence towards positive impact. And I've kind of this 30 by 30 thing at Clif Bar right now. We have our own version of 30 for 30 happening with a different meaning, which is celebrating 30 years of doing business differently by challenging all of our employees to do 30 hours of volunteer service. So when I think about as a company, everything that we can direct our efforts to, and the voice that we have to put out call to actions, maybe to suggest what consumers could do to get involved as well. My question would be, how can companies and individuals get involved and support the success of America the Beautiful?
Well, again, I think that what you're doing, companies, especially companies like Clif Bar, are doing a lot around the social justice efforts. And I think working with nonprofits in this space and civic organizations and young people, because you bring something that the infrastructure that a lot of these organizations may need. And so I think you will be able to, for example, if there are organizations who do great work but don't have the infrastructure to write a proposal to an RFP or to an IFP, you all can help them do that. Your employees can help them do that. And so your employees and the company could develop some types of initiatives to help work on the 30 by 30 initiative based on the requirements of what that's going to be. And I don't have the requirements for funding or how that's going to be implemented in front of me, but we can find out. But I think the implementation is going to require the private sector to partner with nonprofits.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I would love to talk about a little bit more about the nitty gritty on climate policy. Teresa and I have had some interesting conversations. American Whitewater does really incredible work on hydropower and other climate policy. And I'd love for the two of you to be able to talk about this a little bit.
Thank you, Tanya. American Whitewater has been on the front row seat to the impacts of climate change on our rivers. We witnessed firsthand the effects of shrinking snowpack that reduces stream flows on our watersheds across California. This directly affects the ecological health and public enjoyment of our rivers. And so therefore we support legislative, regulatory, and project level initiatives that have climate benefits like 30 by 30. And we strive to increase awareness of climate issues within our community. There is an opportunity to address climate change on a good portion of our work here at American Whitewater, which lands in the realm of hydropower. Hydropower can have significant impact on the watersheds we recreate on, having a vast environmental footprint. And one glaring issue we encounter on a regular basis is that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC as we call it for short, has a reluctance to support climate change studies when utilities like Pacific Gas and Electric are applying for new license to operate. FERC has also been slow to embrace studies on new technologies and that would help address climate change, such as coupling battery energy storage with existing hydropower. Technology like this would give power utilities the flexibility to provide flows to our rivers that are beneficial to the power generation, natural fisheries, and public recreation. So I wanted to know what policy and legislative steps can be taken to ensure that on the federal level, thorough climate change analysis and promising technologies are embraced by the regulatory agencies such as FERC.
Wow, at the federal level, that's going to require all of us to weigh in with the regulatory agencies and making sure, depending on which ones we have to weigh in on, that the right people are appointed there, because so often these regulatory bodies don't have the type of profile of people who really get it. And so we would have to drill down a little bit, depending on the agency you're talking about, because the other thing is so many of our regulations now have been dismantled in the process of putting them back in place. And that's a problem right now. But I think the administration is moving as quickly as they can. So we would have to look at what department, what agency, and then figure out who's on those regulatory bodies, and then begin to work with it and put forth what we want. Oftentimes, the Federal Register will have open periods, comment periods for rulemaking. And so we have to comment during rulemaking processes, and we have to send in. It's almost like it's almost like a lobby. Well, it is a lobbying effort, sending in comments, sending in what we want out of these regulatory agencies and bodies.
And just kind of to follow up on that, the technologies that could address climate change are a large investment. San Francisco Public Utilities Commission recently made a $220 million investment to add battery energy storage to their solar facilities. And this is the type of technology and investment American Whitewater would like to see San Francisco employ on their hydropower projects, which are located on the wild and scenic Tuolumne River. But costs can be prohibitive. So my question is really about the climate investment legislation, which could pass within the reconciliation process, which can also help incentivize clean energy investments. Can you give us an idea of where the climate legislation is within the process of reconciliation and what is needed to get it passed?
Well, okay, some of the provisions, what's needed to get it back, but let me just give you some of the provisions that speak to this. One, the tax credits to grow domestic supply chains for solar, for wind, and other non-fossil fuel energy sources. Subsidies for electric vehicles. Funding for charge stations, more charge stations. Money for climate-friendly farming. Credits to increase energy efficiency in homes and cut the cost of rooftop solar. Cutting the cost for installing rooftop solar panels. But okay, so those are part of the provisions of the bill, but it's a political, again, we've got to get a couple of senators on board. That's where it stands. We passed it in the House. This is the huge parts of Build Back Better. I mean, Build Back Better had many, many, many provisions that address the climate emergency. And so it's there. And of course, we're looking at provisions that we can take out and pass as single legislation, but we don't know that the Senate would even pass that. So right now, this is about, I don't want to say November, but we have to really rev up our political work in key states that we need to have their votes. I mean, Build Back Better with the climate provisions, that's not going anywhere unless we get some key senators to vote for it or to end the filibuster, which we should do. If we ended the filibuster, we would have had this done. But we can't get that done. So I just think we have to keep at it and recognize that we're going to keep at it. You all keep at it. And hopefully people in West Virginia and Arizona will increase their political work and engagement with their members of the Senate, and that we do the right thing in November. And we have to keep that going. And there are breakthroughs. You never know. I mean, we may be able to one day get up and say, oh, well, enough work has been done in these states that where we can pass some of these provisions. So we can't just say it's done and it's over with. We have to make sure we remember to have hope that the arc of justice, moral arc of justice is long, the universe is long, but it does bend toward justice. And periodically, that happens. We see justice.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Yeah, we are all working on that, and any ideas that you have about how we can better support, including rallying folks in those key states that you mentioned. I know we're eager to do more. I was wondering if I could ask one quick question about land protections, which is, I know that the House passed the Protecting America's Wilderness and Public Lands Act several times, I think 3 times in the past couple of years. The Senate recently passed America's Outdoor Recreation Act. I would love to hear any thoughts that you have about how that outdoor community and people who love the outdoors can help pass a kind of joint package of these public lands and recreation bills by the end of this Congress. Do you see a path for that, and what could we do to help?
Yeah, I think getting to your members of Congress, if they haven't co-sponsored these bills, some have passed the House. Well, we passed them in the House, haven't we? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, three
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, yeah, you said 3 times. I said, really? Okay. So it's in the Senate and target those senators. I mean, I'm not sure which senators are holding out on this. If you all know, you should let us know. Maybe we can help to weigh in also with I know our senators are fine with it, or they should be. So this stuff is so it must be so refined that you have a list of senators that you have to convince. And that's what your job is. Go down that list, have your partners with Outdoor Afro in the key states where senators are on the fence, and see if you can turn them around. Because this place is about votes, and members of the House and the Senate, in many respects, when they hear from their constituents in a way that they feel like they must be accountable, then you'll get the vote. I mean, it's basic as that.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's pretty basic, unfortunately. It's just organized.
Yeah. I know we don't have a whole lot of time with you. I was hoping to maybe shift the conversation to appropriations a little bit. Wanted to open it to the panelists if they wanted to ask questions. I know this is really your area of expertise that is opaque for a lot of people, and I'm hoping that we can ask you some questions and you can maybe shed some light on that process. Teresa, I don't know if you wanted to ask, we had talked before a little bit about funding projects.
So the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, thank you very much for getting that past the line. It is an example of the funding opportunities available for our access and recreational interests. American Whitewater zeroed in on the appropriations for ecosystem restoration that addresses recreation sites and the multi-benefit projects to improve watershed health. But just looking at that act alone, it is a daunting job to figure out what is available and how to access this funding. And I imagine if we are lucky enough to get some of the same things passed within the climate investment legislation, that we have the same questions of how do we access this. So can you give us any advice on the best place to start? How do organizations and stakeholders begin to access this funding? And do you have a point person in your office that we can go to that can help that networking?
Yeah, most members have a ledge director who can point you in the right direction. We do a lot of grants workshops and putting out information, but what you need is, and again, going back to Clif Bar and Lauren in the private sector, we need to get someone who knows this. I don't know if you have a consortium or some kind of development operation going on for nonprofits and for the bill to access this funding, because it is mammoth. I mean, sometimes I think, the federal government is established to keep people from engaging, only those who know how to engage and get the money, because it's, a very tedious process, but it can be done. But again, my office can help wherever you all live. Call your members of Congress; they can help. We can send you, if for instance, if it's some of these provisions are being implemented through Department of Transportation, you have to know in advance when they're going to put out the RFPs. Maybe we can find out, like, when is this coming out so you're ready, or do we have a public document that tells you what the guidelines are? Or if it's the Department of Interior, there may be a specific person or department that's responsible for sending out the RFPs for the money and the eligibility. The other thing is eligibility requirements. Are nonprofits eligible for the money that probably they are for these kinds of resources? But again, going back to the technical expertise, the way that a lot of these big corporations work, they have a Washington presence. And I'm just thinking out loud right now, but it would be interesting if Outdoor Alliance had a person or two here in Washington, D.C. that you relied on to honcho this for the organizations that you're trying to raise, get the money from, because it's a daunting task. But you need somebody who knows who has this process down. You have deadlines to meet. I mean, so much documentation, so many deadlines to meet. But we've been trying to get everything streamlined on this infrastructure bill. So I think it's going to be a lot easier, but it's still very, daunting. And so you need 2 or 3 people who that's all they do is look for where the money is in this infrastructure bill, get those proposals written, get it on time. And of course, anybody in my district who's working on anything, they know they can call us and we'll write letters, we'll call, we'll do whatever. But you all have to get it started.
Yeah, thank you.
And the money's there, so I want to make sure, and there's so many equity provisions in the infrastructure that we made sure were there. So don't let them say they couldn't find proposals or organizations to access these funds.
Thank you. Before we shift, I want to be able to take a question or two, but before we shift there, Rue, I wondered if you wanted to ask any more questions or have any more conversation.
Yeah, I just, first of all, your Women in Climate bill is brilliant. So Outdoor Afro's core demographic, coincidentally, are 70% Black women between the ages of 25 and 44. And these are women who are community amplifiers. These are mothers, aunties, sisters in the church. They're in your sorority. And when they come out with us, they're coming out sometimes 5 deep, grandma in tow, baby on the back. And so I really love how you're tapping into the community amplifier that women are, as well as the grave and sometimes troubling brunt of responsibility we have for stewarding our families into the outdoors. And so I just would love to hear a bit more about equity and access. We know that welcoming is so important. And if you go to a park or public area and there's not a clean bathroom, that's not welcoming. And so would love to talk about, how we can create welcoming through infrastructure, but also help to support that relationship that we know people need in order to take them across the altar into real conservation action.
Sure. Well, the Women in Climate Change Act, that's HR 260. And what it does is, what we're trying to do is empower women to be at the table when we're discussing these policies and practices to help communities embark on a path towards clean energy and sustainable development. And so to be able to help get over the finish line, we have to have the input and the ideas and the experiences of women, especially women of color. And so this bill really wants all of our climate policies to have women at the table, creating those policies and making sure that the impacts are going to be positive on the policies that we're creating. And so that's what I'm doing with the Women in Climate Act. And so you all have to figure out the strategies that on the ground level, but I'm trying to create that framework so that at the federal level, we'll have the policy established so that you can run with it. And we need to get more co-sponsors. There are only 70 right now. To bring a bill to the floor, you need 200 and over 200 co-sponsors. So we got to get to work on this bill. It's really important, just like on my school bill, but it's not like I can go get co-sponsors. The way this place operates is you have to get constituents and members of Congress districts say, look, we want you to sign on to HR 260, for example, because that would really address a lot of the issues we're talking about today.
Thank you. Happy to do that.
That's a good call also for everyone on this webinar who's not in the East Bay to reach out to your representative and ask them to co-sponsor it.
Yeah, that's how democracy is supposed to work.
So I'd love to I think we just have you for a couple more minutes, but would love to share one of the questions that came in the question and answer box from Austin, who asks, what might members of the public do to encourage more support for hiring diverse staff to support the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management work on recreation and access related projects?
Well, we need to know which department are you talking about now?
Well, the question is what can members of the public do to encourage more support for hiring diverse staff in
Yeah.
all of these agencies?
In all of them, okay, because each agency, I mean, you know, especially under the Biden administration, they have an equity initiative. So what members of the public need to do is find out who's responsible for implementing that equity policy, and then start interacting with them. Because part of what I do, because I have the State Department and USAID under my jurisdiction, I mean, I've had to fund the establishment of offices of diversity and inclusion, because when you look at USAID and State Department, it lacks the participation in the workforce of people of color and indigenous people. That's just the way it is. So we had to fight to get this established, but we got it done. But most of these agencies should have some offices like that. And so the public needs to weigh in with them and tell them to do their job. Secondly, go to your member of Congress. Like if you're in my district and you tell me that people of color are not being hired in the department of whatever, then I will definitely write a letter and say, look, this is how we organize to make them change their policies, because they're required to do this. You know, they're definitely required, and this administration has stepped up. But the public, you know, stepping up with an executive order to do is one thing, but you all have to make sure it happens. And then if you're not seeing it happening, let your representatives know. And I do this every day with all the agencies. When I see they're supposed to come out with reports, demand a report, demand them to give that report disaggregated by race and gender. You know, generally they'll just say, oh, we have X amount of minorities, for example. Okay. What you want them to do is say how many indigenous people, API, Latinas, African Americans, you know, you want that disaggregated. You just don't want them to say we have X percentage of minorities, because that way they get away with a lot of not being a really diverse agency, because they've not done their job as it relates to inclusion.
Thank you. That is really good counsel. I know we only have you for another minute. Is there anything that you would like to say in closing? We are just so grateful to have had you here with us.
Well, I just hope that you all continue with this conversation, because the federal government, I mean, you know, it's your government and we've got to make it work. And I think that's what I'm hearing from everyone, especially as it relates to outdoor spaces, land preservation, preserving our waterways, you know, the whole 9 yards. And so protecting public lands and creating these equitable and inclusive outdoor spaces, the federal government has a huge role in that. And so out of this, I just hope you all connect with your members of Congress more closely, okay? And this is a great way to do this, but do it in their districts. You know, go to members that you want to talk to, who you don't know or who you think needs to be a little more proactive in some of these efforts. And so I would say that this is a really great first start, but get the politics of this right and get engaged more with elected officials. I'm in the federal space, so of course I'm going to say get in touch with your federal reps and make sure that they're doing the right thing, because we're trying in every which way to push the justice agenda on all fronts here in Congress.
Thank you. It's such a good reminder that constituent voices matter so much.
Oh, yes. Thank you all again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
Yeah, really
Thank
wonderful
you.
time
Bye-bye.
with you. Appreciate your time.
Nice being with you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists for being here as well. This was such a treat. I really appreciate all of you and the wonderful questions and expertise that you brought.
Thanks for bringing us
Thank
together.
you. Yeah, thank you so much for having us and bringing us together. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
Yeah, likewise. This was great. All right, take care, everyone. See you
Okay.
next time.
Bye.